What's going on, friends, and welcome back to another video. If we don't know each other already, my name is Lauren. I am a homeschooling mama, former teacher, and I'm sharing all that I'm experiencing as a transitioning new to homeschooling mom. And as the current school year is coming to an end for some of us, if you're choosing to follow like a traditional schedule, and we're planning for a new school year, I'm considering curriculum, seeing what everyone else is talking about, and I wanted to put my 2 cents in and also kind of help you navigate the waters of what your plan for next homeschooling year looks like. Now, when it comes to choosing a curriculum that's fit for you and fit for your children, when we're talking about home education, there are a number of options out there, but there are very few resources into realistically choosing something that's going to be a great fit for you and your particular homeschooling situation. So today I'm giving you 4 tips to consider before and while choosing your homeschool curriculum and your plan to prep for next year and for what's to come in the new homeschooling realm. Okay, the one thing that I put at the top of the list when it comes to what I discuss about homeschool, based on what I have learned in the classroom and gone through these past 2 years when homeschooling and dipping my toes into that world, is being realistic. It's very easy to see the Instagram or social media representation of home learning, but it is very rare that you run across someone who is giving you a realistic view of what actually happens day to day, not what they planned to happen. Because we all know you can have the bells and whistles of whatever your plan is, what your approach is going to be, what you think that your ideal routine and schedule is going to be like. But when it comes to the real world and real life happenings, that does not happen. So when you're thinking about all of the curriculum options, program options out there for taking on a new year, being realistic will help you so much. A little goes a long way when it comes to that. So be realistic for what you are going to commit to taking on as the leader, as the captain of the homeschooling ship, and what your children are prepared for, willing, and ready to take on when it comes to their education as well. Okay, with being realistic in the back of our mind, the first thing that I want you to consider before you commit to and schedule out a whole curriculum or program that you've seen is your routine. So not only do we have to consider like when homeschool is going to fit into our daily schedule, but also when you're ready to sit down and do homeschool and lay out that whole process, what the actual routine will look like. So when you are looking through and considering a homeschool curriculum, it's important to know how the lessons are broken down, what your flow and schedule will become if you commit to that program, and how that aligns with what you're already doing or what you are going to be expecting of your child. When there are various styles and approaches when it comes to this particular topic of schedules and routines and kind of how the curriculum will flow. And many of them will look more like a traditional class setting. And if that's something that you're after, perfect. But if it's not something that you're after, then that is also something you need to take into consideration for your sanity and your kids' well-being, since you are going to be leading that curriculum. Okay, now, although you will be leading, we have to keep our followers in mind, our children, our learners, because their needs are going to be at the top of the priority list. If we are set up for something that is so far out of our vision and our expectations and what we've already experienced, then it seems very unattainable. And it's hard for children to see the end goal or what you're working toward unless it is clearly laid out. So having that communication with your child, but also understanding you need for them to see where you're going, but you also need to understand how they get their best. So I always talk about learning styles and how our kids and ourselves really lock in information. So if you are expecting your child who loves to learn through video and hands-on experiences to sit down with a curriculum that is a bunch of reading and not a lot of like activity, that is going to be very hard to fit a square into a circle hole, if that makes sense. A square block into a circle hole. You know that. you know that whole analogy. So keeping that in mind, it's really important that you start to build and recognize the relationship that your child has with learning and the communication that you have with your child. So for instance, if something is difficult and your kid's like, Mom, I am not interested in this at all. I'm not really learning anything. I'm not getting anything out of this session. It's difficult for me because I'm not interested. So we come across that too. I know, for instance, my husband loves to watch documentaries on some things that I'm like, what is this? And I'll find myself on my phone laughing at a video on TikTok. And it's not that I'm intentionally being uninvolved or trying to like detach from what we're watching, but I do not have an investment in that. My interests don't align with that. So it's hard for me to really get into it. Even as adults, we can understand and relate to. So our children don't necessarily have all of the tools that they can communicate that to us yet, but there are definite signifiers of this. Under that little tier of your child's needs, not only what they're interested in, but also their attention span and attention to details that the curriculum needs for them to have. So how all that will align, I promise you, it is like setting the combination and unlocking their like brain lock. Does that make any sense, guys? I hope so. When it comes to your child's readiness, let's imagine that you've just taught letters to your little and then you would jump to reading paragraphs. That will not align correctly with the like tiers of learning that skill. So if you are expecting for your child to go from having like very little sit down, let's learn through a lecture and then do an activity, if they have not built up that process and the stamina to do that, that is an unrealistic expectation as well. So when it comes to curriculum, looking at what is expected and the amount of time that's dedicated for each of those lessons and activities, as well as how they are relayed and how the information is given, those are all very, very, very important pieces to what your child needs, and they may not be at the level of being able to communicate that to you. So it is something that you're going to have to be very aware of, and it's a learning process. So noticing that something doesn't work doesn't mean that you are doing something wrong or that homeschooling is not for you. It just may mean that some things need to be arranged. And especially when jumping into homeschool for the first time, I will tell you firsthand, having to rearrange and reassess and mix some things up along the way is going to happen. But that's great because that means that you are tailoring learning for your child and for your family's needs as well. Okay, and then the last thing, these all kind of go together, and like I said, your family has needs too. So noticing the philosophy of education, or like what your mindset is and where you are setting the end goal for your child to be, is important whenever you're choosing a curriculum as well. Because if a curriculum does not necessarily align with the values and the importance that you have in mind about your child's education, then that's not it. That's not the one for you. So noticing what you think is the purpose of education, what is the reason behind schooling, what long-term goals do you have for your child when it comes to your involvement and approach with schooling, you also need to take that into account. That is a big piece of the puzzle. And talking about this with your spouse or even with your kids as well is very important. Like I said, having open lines of communication go a long way. You don't have to separate the teaching side and the learning side. It can all be cohesive when it comes to homeschooling. Be the captain of your own ship and do it proudly, because you're gonna rock it. You know your kids well, and you will get to know them even more along the way. So like I said, don't be afraid to mix things up or plug things in or take things out if they aren't working for you. And if you find a curriculum that you love, go with it. If it doesn't work along the way, that's fine. If you don't see any curriculum that you love, that's okay too, because there are also avenues that you can go to create your own, to plug and plan your own learning, your own units. And I will share some videos about all of that jazz down below, because that is also an option. So I wish you all of the best luck when it comes to choosing a fit curriculum for you and your family and your learner or learners. If you have any questions, I would absolutely love to help you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you in the next one. Of course, everyone has to mow their lawn right now as soon as I sit down to do a video, right? Not even kidding. Like, both of my neighbors are mowing their lawns right now, right this second.